They have money to hire a private investigator. People who have gone out for a pack of cigarettes and never went back to your family. What happened after you left? I got married right out of high school. Everything was going well, but we were young and both were our first partners. I came home early one day and walked in on my wife with another man. Standard insanity ensued, followed by her begging for forgiveness, and we went to months of counseling. Everything seemed well and dandy. She seemed like a totally different woman and couldn't live without me. One day I log into our desktop PC and her Facebook is loaded and there are multiple messages, and I had to look. I found exactly what I knew I would find. It crushed me, but I acted like nothing happened. That weekend I packed up my favorite clothes and belongings that meant a lot to me and snuck them to the car. Sunday evening I said, "Hey, I'm going to take the dogs to the dog park and hike for a few hours." When I left, I texted our neighbor to see if anyone showed up at the house. She replied pretty quickly that a male visitor was by very quickly. I told her goodbye and the dogs and I just drove. I had decent savings and thought if it, start off somewhere new, and that is what I did. My ex-wife didn't even try and contact me until around lunchtime the next day. When I didn't respond, she blew me up with photos and videos of her with multiple men and about how bad of a lover I was. It messed me up, but I just kept trucking. I ended up in a smaller town where I saw someone was hiring for my trade. Years later, I remarried to the best human ever. I didn't go out for cigarettes, but I pulled a similar stunt. My mom is toxic and I had no spine, so I told her I was going to move in with my dad for the summer. I said I would be back before the end of August. After I moved in with my dad, I got my state ID. My mom didn't want me to have any kind of ID, and I finally got my driver's permit a few weeks later. I felt bad for lying at the time, but now I'll know if I didn't lie to her I would have never gotten out of there. I would be stuck living on a little hobby farm with a woman who did everything in her power to tear me down and hurt me. When I was 18, I moved out from my toxic father. I was commuting to college at the time and I had morning classes, so the night before I packed my car with as much of my stuff as I could, and set off. One of my professors that I regularly talked to after class noticed that my car was full of clothes and asked if everything was okay. Over lunch I explained my situation, and he offered to take me in. I had already made arrangements to live with my mother. After my classes for the day were over, I went home for the first time since I was a child to live with my mother. I slept on the couch for months before getting my own bed, and we didn't always have the money to eat, but we made it work. I have seen my father one time since then because he swore to me that he had changed. That night he proceeded to get wasted and tried to put his hands on me. I haven't seen him since, and I have no regrets. I still regret not being able to say goodbye to my sister 12 years ago. I said goodbye to my brother and my mom, but I was the only one who knew I would never come back. I moved 300 miles away. I have seen my brother and my mom twice since then. I haven't seen my sister since I put her down for her nap that day, before I knew I was leaving. After I left, my mom got married. My sister went to live with her grandparents. My brother chose to be homeless rather than let her mom drag him around different cities in the middle of a school year. I was able to finish school, which wouldn't have happened if I stayed. Got basically blackmailed into seeing my mom after 6 years while my ex pretended we were together. I finally found a family that actually liked me. Met my boyfriend. Friends for 8 years. Together for 4. Got my own cat. Have my own apartment with bills paid early. Overall it has been great in between my mom popping into my life. Mine was I'm going to the gas station. I'm in an interfaith and interracial relationship, and my family never ever accepted it. It escalated to physical violence and I needed to make an exit. I let my mom know I wanted to marry him. She told me I could stay and be less than the dirt under her shoe, or I could go. I left. It's been 3 years. I went back once to get my clothes, but haven't been back. It's been super trying. They still have some contact with me, but refuse to accept my one and only boundary. Show me that you can even acknowledge my fiancé, and then we can start rebuilding. Ultimately, I had to walk away from a place where I was being punished for not doing my duty as a daughter, which is putting my happiness second to the respect of the family name. This was the first time in my life I ever truly wanted something just for me, and they couldn't handle it. So now, they're stuck in a place where I'm the bad guy, and I'll always be the bad guy, because to them I should be falling over myself to get my moms to forgive me, and I just don't. It has really opened my eyes to how toxic my family actually is, and how conservatively I was being raised. My biggest sadness is that my brothers, who I love very dearly, cannot fathom going against my mom. But I'm a better and healthier person now, and I would never go back. When I was 16, I moved out without telling my stepdad, but my mom was in on it. And I just moved in with my grandparents. I left on a Friday. Got all my stuff in just 2 trips. I was told he didn't even notice I was gone the first weekend. He was pretty mad once he figured it out, but it was all mostly a non-event. Everything turned out okay for me. It will have been 21 years, this September. I did walk out on my mother and siblings without any notice. Dad was not in the picture. Best decision of my life. My mother refuses treatment for her very serious mental illness and was incredibly neglectful while I was growing up. I saw the affected at burn out older siblings with no motive or drive and instead embraced the crazy just to feel sane in the toxic family home we lived in. I was homeless for about a year and a half, living out of a duffel and bumming food from friends. I feel like my life hasn't even started until I left it behind. It held me back for 17 years and I now am finally being able to find out who I am. Mom never came looking for me. I reconnected with my estranged father, whom I learned was in the military from the moment he was 18 until he was HD at 43. He has severe PTSD from his 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's now getting his master's in outdoors leadership, which I believe is a perfect way to use his massive skill set. I don't see him much if ever, but at least I know some blood is still thicker than water. 5 years ago I moved in with my then girlfriend. First time living with someone I dated and first relationship in a very long time. She turned out to be a nightmare. She had 2 boys, 4 and 5, and their father died of an overdose on their couch less than a year prior. I did not know this moving in, and the boys found him. She was also crazy and was a pretty bad pillhead and smoked illegal substances until a few months before I met her. I moved in with her way too soon because I didn't feel like paying rent for my apartment when I was never there. Big mistake. I bought a truck from her parents and was making payments on it, and we put it in both of our names so I could go on her insurance. I used to leave for work at 4 a.m. and sometimes wouldn't be home until 9 to 10 p.m. Hour-plus drive, and by the time I'd get home she'd usually be plastered drunk, like a bottle of whiskey deep, and would just berate me the second I got home. If I said anything wrong to her she would explode and threaten to take my name off my truck title, that she hid from me, and report it stolen. One day I had enough. I called my boss and told him I needed to get out of there and needed the day off. I waited until she left for work and moved all my stuff out to a friend's house in an RV he had. I went to the DMV and filed for a lost title and got a new one just in my name. Got new insurance, changed my phone number, and rented a hotel room for 2 weeks far away from her but much closer to my job. I had a few thousand saved up and used almost all of it to get away from her. She never saw it coming. Always told me I was too much of a wimp to actually do anything about how she treated me. Oh, and I never paid for the truck. Kind of a D-move to do to her parents, but at the time I needed to put as much space between her and I as possible. And she told me she talked to her psychic, one of those BS phone psychics. And they told her to tell me to spend as much time with my mother as possible because I didn't have much time with her left. My mom had just found out she had terminal cancer and only about a year left to live if she was lucky. If I hadn't completely cut this psycho out of my life I was going to do something very stupid and likely spend a long time in prison. Only thing I feel bad about is ghosting on her 2 boys. They looked up to me as a father figure and adored me, especially because their mom was horribly to them. She would cuss at them like they were adults and would constantly brag about how her sister worked for Child Protective Services so she knew how to abuse them without breaking the law. Years of my life I regret, but it made me a lot more cautious about relationships. I am now engaged to the love of my life and have gotten sober, and my personal life is doing nothing but getting better every day. I moved out when I was 15. I was living with my mom, sister, and older brother. It was my older brother's house. His house was unlivable. The water was orange, there were fleas and ticks everywhere, and, because of his 11 cats that kept reproducing because they were never neutered, there were piles of cat poop against the walls. On top of that, my mom was a textbook narcissist. Always going out and partying, passing out drunk and snorting illegal substances, the works. She went to Myrtle Beach for a week. I mentioned it to my best friend, who invited me to stay at her place until my mom came back. Halfway through the week, her mom invited me to live with them. I said yes and stayed there until I left for the Navy 2.5 years later. I still talk to my parents sometimes, but it's an estranged relationship at best. I'm almost 23 and happily married, which I didn't even tell my family about until a year after, so I suppose it all worked out in the end. Not married or with kids, but siblings and parents, thus everyone else in the family. But I parked my car 2 blocks over, told my neighbors I had someone stalking me that would tell them they were my family, and spent about an emergency month finding a new city to live in, then doing the move for my stuff to the U-Haul at 2 a.m. I regret the 2 a.m. move. I'm sure it wasn't quiet. I liked and tried to respect my neighbors, even now. And lying to them was messed up, but it was more acceptable than asking them to lie for me to the face of my ex-family that were trying to track me down. They'd know if my neighbors were lying, that something was up, to keep nosing about. I seriously don't know what happened next. I never want to inquire to find out. They have money to hire a private investigator. They would. I don't want to make it easier for them by showing back up in the same old places I was before to see what happened in the aftermath with them. First thing I did landing here was introduce myself to the neighbors, get on a first-name basis, like I always did before this ever had to happen. Good to be respected in the neighborhood, even better to have people who'll tell you if someone is nosing about. I'm probably out of the will, and out of almost $1 million of inheritance. But F that, happiness, security and lack of paranoia is worth it. I haven't seen my son since his 2nd birthday. His mom, my ex, left me for a younger guy that she met at work. That's pretty common I guess, but in the process she tried to destroy my reputation by telling anyone who would listen that I was toxic. I guess she realized that cheating makes you the bad guy but a battered wife who cheats is fine. Everyone bought it, including my own family. The only person who remained on my side was my mother-in-law, who had lived with us for several years at that point, and was still living with us at the time, and knew firsthand that it was BS. I had a lot of time to reflect on our situation, and I decided it would be best to go out for cigarettes because she used to bring our son when she went to fool around with this guy, so he was already a father figure of sorts. I had no doubt she would tell the same mistreat story to our son when he grew old enough to ask. He was too young to remember me. Everyone believed me to be some kind of monster anyway. And so once the divorce was finalized, I left. I moved thousands of miles away, cut all contact with all of our mutual friends in both families, changed my contact info, and tried to start over. As far as what happened with my son and the rest of my family, I don't know. Everyone probably still thinks I'm a monster, and I guess that's fine. I guess I am a monster after abandoning him like I did. I can only hope that my ex-mother-in-law doesn't rock the boat and try to defend me in front of him. Because more than anything I want him to have a normal, loving, wholesome relationship with his mother and stepdad. As far as what happened to me, I'm successful in my professional life but a mess personally. I haven't dated because I am scared of losing everything like that again, and I haven't made any new friends because I fear they'll drift away when they discover my past. Most nights I still have dreams about my ex-wife and son, but their faces are smudged because I don't remember what they looked like, and I got rid of the photos long ago. I don't really eat out, or travel, or have any ambitions anymore. I guess the most succinct way to put it is that I've become a hermit. My parents divorced when I was young, and I never really had any contact with my father. My mother was emotionally toxic growing up, and never failed to say I was overweight or a failure. My stepfather was always super strict, and we simply never got along. The summer after I graduated from high school my stepfather lost his job. This caused my mother to go into a downward spiral, causing her to starve herself and constantly scream at the people around here. My stepdad always came up with reasons to not be home, and they almost divorced over it. My mother took $800 from my own paychecks to help pay the bills without my permission. After she did that, I finally had enough. The day I got a new job where I knew I could afford to live on my own, I got the hell out within a couple days. I moved all of my own stuff out their house, and never looked back. It probably drove my mother off the edge, but I don't regret doing it at all. Fast forward to now, they ended up moving to a new state and I don't talk to any of them. The whole situation has caused my brothers and sister to not want to talk to me, but I understand. I still struggle terribly, having anxiety attacks and spouts of depression often. It's hard not having any family to talk to when things get rough, but I would never have it any other way. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell for more real-life struggles no one wants to talk about. Click the right box for the related playlist. Let us know in the comments what you think about these stories.